Hi, St. Paul's parents. Thanks for spending a few moments with us here as we go over some of the details of our goal to return to school in the fall. We're going to share some more details in future weeks, but we thought it'd be a good opportunity for you to get a good picture of what the fall will most likely look like. We wanted to start this all in God's Word with a devotion. Romans 15, verse 5 to 7 seems like a fitting devotion for what's been happening lately in our society, but also just with as we try to come up with a path to move forward. You might notice that patience is wearing thin in many instances. You probably notice it on social media, you probably notice it in the news. And that patience is wearing also thin with each other when there's disagreements. And that the Christian church is not immune to that either. There's a lot of disagreements about how to move forward with church, with how to move forward with school. And I think it's important for us to look at Romans 15 when we have disagreements and people that aren't seeing eye to eye. And God will give us some encouragement here. He says, "May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you the same attitude of mind toward each other that Christ Jesus had, so that with one mind and one voice you may glorify the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God." And I think we ask that question, well, how does Jesus Christ, what's his attitude towards us? Because we're supposed to have that same one towards each other. We know it from what we read in God's Word, right? That without God's grace, we are sinful. We are worthy to be cast aside by God. But what did God do? He went out of his way and he saved us because he loved us so much. So despite our flaws, God still loved us. The people that you might disagree with, you might think that they have a lot of flaws too. But we should look at them the same way that Christ looks at us, with that Christian love, with that love, that knowing that these people, we're going to be singing praises to God in heaven together one day in unison. And God asks us to kind of have that same attitude here while we're still on earth, because our goal is also with one mind and one voice together, we may glorify God, the Father of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So that God tells us to accept one another just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. And that's really our greatest goal here on earth. It's to bring praise to God. And we're going to bring praise to God through the lives that we live, through how we respond to a situation like this, which we hope is a once-in-a-lifetime situation. How did we respond? Did we respond out of love, or did we respond out of hate? So that's just an important thing for us to remember as we move forward here. We just wanted to share a few resources that we used to create this plan. It wasn't whimsical in any way. We looked at a lot of different recommendations that were handed down to us from our leaders, and also just in conversations with our staff, who are definitely experts on day-to-day operations, and also you, the school parents, with that survey you took, which was very helpful to us. You'll notice that in the survey, we also have just different ways of viewing this. We have some that are feeling comfortable and safe about returning in the fall. We have some that have some reservations, and even some that have some major reservations. And obviously, I don't think we're going to be able to accommodate everybody perfectly, but we understand that there will be some meeting people's needs as best as we can, and that's really what we're going for here. Our mission statement kind of gave us the guiding principles for moving forward in COVID-19. So you'll see our mission statement here is we are here to assist parents as they raise their children intellectually or spiritually, intellectually, socially, physically for life and eternity. We want to nurture them with God's word in a caring environment. That really laid things out for us really well. The first guiding principle that we're going to have during this COVID-19 season is that our children still grow closer to Jesus, because that's really the most important, the eternal impact that's going to be on our children, even beyond our short lives here. We do want our children and our families to remain healthy. That's a guiding principle that we're going to be having. Sorry, the third one, we want our children to grow socially and emotionally as well. That's very important to us. And then our children will grow in their God-given gifts. And you'll notice that sometimes these are going to be appear at least to be in conflict with each other. I was talking to a parent of our school that's in the medical field, and he's like, if the COVID-19 was the only thing in our minds, if health and safety was the only thing, then yeah, you wouldn't have school. But we have all these other things to consider, and that's kind of what we've been hearing too, that from the American Academy of Pediatrics, that children, they need to grow in these ways. They need to develop, and school is the best place for them to develop. And then we know that children grow closer to Jesus when we can be there to provide them with that spiritual encouragement as well. There's a few different ways that we're going to be, I basically could say 3 areas that we're going to bring up that are kind of the big areas that we're looking to have some plans for. So we're going to share the first one with you, which is arrival and pickup. And you'll notice if you've been at our school that 7:45 to 8 o'clock is the busy time. And that's where on our survey, a lot of parents said they would really appreciate if we found ways to, reduce that crowding during those busy times to try to mitigate the spread of the virus. So that's what we're going to be trying to do during 7:45 to 8 o'clock. So this is actually kind of normal where students in grades 1 through 8 enter our building through the school commons entrance here. We do ask though, and this is something to be new for this year, to start the year, we hope that this won't be the whole year, by the way, that only students and staff in this area, in the main hallway area or downstairs, we would ask that parents would refrain from entering during that 7:45 time, all the way to 3:30 actually, just because students will be in the building, and then you also have these busy times when students are coming and going. We do, we'll mention this later, we do want to still allow preschool and kindergarten parents to drop off their children. And if you've been a parent of a preschooler and a kindergartner, you understand, or you might remember when you're dropping them off, and just that socially and emotionally wouldn't quite be appropriate at that age to not allow parents to say goodbye to their children. But we do still want to reduce that crowding. So how do we do that? We're going to ask that families, once they drop their child off either at the preschool or in the kindergarten classroom, which is around here, to exit out these doors instead, just to reduce that, that back and forth crowding. We'll do a few other safety measures, and Mrs. Maddox is in communication with the preschool families about that at the moment, about just making sure that everybody's staying safe in that crowded area. But we felt it would not quite be appropriate to not allow that. As far as like before care goes, we're actually going to be having them in here to give them more space, more on that later, but to also reduce crowding. We know that this is kind of just a crowded area in many cases. We're going to hit, these 40 kids that are in before care, or however many it is, we're going to have them take this way into the school building just to avoid all that crowding that happens here. 5th through 8th grade can actually head straight to their classroom in the downstairs area, so there wouldn't be crowding there either. But this should reduce a lot of the crossover that parents were showing some concern over. Same kind of idea at the end of the day at 3:15 to 3:30 is a very busy time. Sorry, hiccups. So we would have students that would kind of stagger as they exit. We're going to have classrooms just take out their class one at a time with their teachers, just to reduce that big mixing, crowding event that happens at the end of the day. We would still allow the preschool families to come in and grab their child and leave using that one directional flow that we have here. Just to kind of share some of the health measures that we have in mind with some of these things and some additional things, but also considering a few other guiding principles that we have here. We are going to limit that parent access to the main school hallway and the downstairs area just to reduce that crowding, like I mentioned, the cross traffic that was seen to be pretty important on the parent survey. We are going to be doing also a temperature check upon arrival, at least to start the year. This was like 75% or even more the families said that was either somewhat important or very important to their child's safety. So that's something that won't really be a lot of work. We have some touch-free thermometers that just take 1 to 2 seconds per kid when they enter the room, and it'll be just providing us that peace of mind and also just that safety from people that are having those symptoms. We're going to ask that we're going to have students kind of be released per classroom, like I mentioned. We're going to ask that families take care of school business. If they, through like a plexiglass window, we're going to install something like that in the school office, just because the school office could be like a very big, spreading zone where you have people coming and going all the time. At least to start the year here, we're going to be doing that. So parents could still, you could see, come to the school office even during this busy time. We would probably recommend that parents try to avoid these busy times for the school office interactions. But if they are going to the office, we will have a spot for them to take care of some business without really entering the office too much. We did feel, like I mentioned, it would not be developmentally appropriate for the kindergarten and preschool kids to, have to be dropped off outside. And then we will have regular access for parents outside the busy hours, like the 6:30 to 7:45. Not a whole lot going on in that main hallway. 3:30 to 5:30, same thing. So parents won't be completely disbarred from the school. They're just during those busy times from 7:45 to 3:30 when there are a lot of kids in the building that we want to keep safe. The second big part is kind of what's happening in the classroom. And this is where we do feel that we have a bit of a natural advantage just when it comes to the numbers in our classroom and the spacing that we can provide, just because they're not so crowded in the classroom. You'll notice that, Rapid City, just from the data that they have available, they're averaging about 25 to 33 students in a classroom. And you'll notice that we have numbers that are pretty much half of that, maybe a little over half of that. So when they're considering measures to take to reduce the number of kids in the classroom, we've already kind of met that threshold, which is nice. So a lot of those things where they're considering like the 2 days on, 2 days off, we don't really have to really consider that too much. The one exception you'll notice is in the 3rd and 4th grade classroom, we have 13 and 12, and they get combined in the afternoon traditionally for like PE, music, like handwriting and things like that. But and that kind of caught our attention. So what we decided to do is to hire a half-time teacher. And what that would do is that can keep the 3rd and 4th grade students split all day. We have Mrs. Hemmelman hired for that. She's doing that in the afternoons for the 4th grade. And that way we're just keeping the classroom split all day at 13 and 12, which is very manageable numbers. We've decided to cap the preschool classroom at 16 for the year. Normally that's 20, so there'll be 1 adult for every 8 students, which will be good in that way too. And we're going to cap the kindergarten classroom normally at a higher cap, but this year it's going to be 15. So we've already reached that at 15. We are no longer taking enrollment in kindergarten. So that way we're just keeping these numbers lower for that reason, so that we don't have to worry about this as much as the Rapid City Public Schools do. There's a few other measures that we're considering with our guiding principles in hand again here. So the health considerations, the guiding principles here. We had some parents in the parent survey that said they're working in the medical field. They say, I'd love to come in and just do some training with each classroom on how to, properly cough, how to handle sneezing, how to wash hands and things like that. And we think that's a great idea just to get that training in place to help mitigate and reduce that spread. Frequent hand washing is just an easy one and an obvious one. When they arrive, when they are about to head out to snack and recess, when they come back from snack and recess, any transfer points like that, you want to make sure that the hands get washed with soap and water. We're going to open the windows whenever possible. And this is where studies show that when you have that natural airflow, things go much better in that way. Transmission is just much lower. And obviously when it's 0 degrees out, we wouldn't, but whenever possible, when practical, definitely do that. We're going to disinfect twice a day, the big one at the end of the day, and then also one just at the middle of the day where we can get the surfaces disinfected to help keep that infection down. And then water bottles, we're going to request that students, if they want to have water at school, they bring a water bottle to fill up with our water bottle fillers, which are touch-free, rather than going to the drinking fountains and getting drinks at the drinking fountains. We're looking even at doing some outdoor lessons that we can mix in, especially more as the students get older. There are, wouldn't really take much if you disregard the palm trees. Really would take more like 4 picnic tables, where they could be like right here, for example. Get an easel up there, and if you wouldn't need any like projector or something like that, it wouldn't work for every class. Like it would work better for like a reading than a math, for example. But you can get outside and mitigate a lot of that spread, because outdoors is just so much better than indoors when it comes to the spread of the virus. And here's where we want to consider a few other of our guiding principles, and sometimes they might seem to be conflicting. So these guiding principles kind of led us to some of these decisions here, like the social emotional growth of our students and their health in that way, and then also just their academic growth as well. So the big one is the masks. So what we landed on is that we would not be requiring students to wear masks, but we wanted to create an environment where if students are bringing them into the room, that they will be welcomed, and that people will be understanding of why they're doing that. We definitely don't want to be in a situation where students are being teased or bullied even for wearing a mask. So that's kind of the number one concern of ours, that we create an environment where we're accepting of one another in Christ, just like our devotion brought up at the beginning here. We will actually have a mask on hand for each student that we're going to be providing, just in case, like, let's say a student is kind of showing some symptoms of being sick. We might take them to their spot while they're waiting for their parents to pick them up, but we'll give them a mask in that meantime, just because students that are symptomatic would be spreading that more than obviously an asymptomatic student. And then there might be some close encounters still to be discussed, like what if we're all on the same bus heading to a field trip, if we're going to be doing field trips, would we have students wear masks in that case? So those are some things that we're still working through. We're going to have students, kind of in the classroom and learning together. And this is something that, we just kind of came to this conclusion discussing as a staff that, can we keep them 6 feet apart at all times? It's actually really hard to keep them, their spacing in the room at 6 feet apart to begin with. And also just understanding that we're not learning in isolation, we're learning together. And that's especially true in the younger grades, that so much of the learning that is taking place is social development and emotional development, and keeping that distance required would really eliminate a lot of that growth that happens in those early ages, that development that needs to take place. Just to kind of give you an example of that with the second grade classroom, and the tables might not always be like this, but or be exactly like this, but let's say that you have a few students that are working together on a project or working together in a lesson. And there's often a lot of discussion that takes place, a lot of brainstorming that takes place between students that you would be losing if you had to separate them for that entire day. There's also a lot of learning in a typical year that happens at the carpet, and every primary teacher will tell you that that's really necessary just to keep kids' attention, to keep kids focused on the lesson, but also just that, like we talked about, that social growth that they're doing among their peers in that area too. Some cutting back of that might be taking place. We're not going to be reckless, we said, but understanding that for growth to take place, there will just need to be, we need to understand that distancing is not going to be happening to that extent in the classroom. And I think we kind of came to this conclusion, and this is what a lot of other resources have been telling us kind of as well, that each classroom itself is kind of be considered your COVID bubble, that there will be more transmission here potentially in a classroom than there would be other parts of the school. The main idea would be to have, prevent the other classrooms from mixing with each other, so that, if there would be an outbreak or there would be, some transmission happening, it would stay to the classroom and not to the whole school. Just to kind of give you another classroom example, with bigger kids, you probably could separate those desks a little more. But same thing, learning is often very social. We learn together, and having everyone learn in isolation in the same room would just kind of go against a lot of teaching practices that are in place. So like I said, we have like the classroom kind of being the COVID bubble in that way. The main idea with large assemblies then would be to prevent the mixing of those COVID bubbles. And this is kind of the guidance we've gotten from our leadership and our state and local authorities especially, that we want to prevent classrooms from mixing, so that if you did have maybe some transmission happening, you would localize it into a classroom and not have it go to the whole school. So we're going to use large spaces whenever we can to just try to get creative in keeping that from happening. One example would be chapel. So at least to start the year, we're looking at having 2 locations for chapel, where the K-3 students, or preschool through third grade would be in the upstairs, and then the 4th grade through 8th grade students would be downstairs. in the fellowship hall, that very large area. So what you can do then, and this is obviously, they're not going to be that tightly close together, but you'd have maybe 4 rows for preschool, 3 rows for 3rd grade, probably 3 rows for kindergarten. I probably should have another row here. But then between each classroom, you'd have 2 empty rows. And then, the preschool can kind of distance as they feel as developmentally appropriate. 3rd grade can distance from each other in the rows as developmentally appropriate, but then keeping those bubbles from interacting too much in a chapel setting. Still some discussion about what's going to be chapel looking like, how much singing would take place and things like that. That hasn't quite been determined, but like how it would operate in this way has kind of been thought out already. And there has been just some discussion about should we have chapel at all? And the conclusion we came to when we're considering our key principles is that public worship is a huge part of our walk of faith in Christ. And that's something we really feel is very important that students are taught and that students live and practice by. And we felt that canceling chapel completely would go against that guiding principle. So we want to make sure that the students are following, guidelines as far as what are laid down by our local authorities, but that we are still giving them that opportunity to grow in that way spiritually, which is obviously the most important guiding principle that we have. Talking about a few other things, moving on from chapel, that we would have lunch in the separate classrooms. We felt that would keep those COVID bubbles from mixing, at least to start the year here. We're going to have lunch in separate classrooms. A few more recess rotations on when people are having recess, just to keep the crowds down, especially outside. While outside transmission is shown to be much, much lower, we can still do what we can to make sure that the groups are a little smaller for recess, not having all the kids out at once on the same location, and maybe even rotating where everyone's having their recess time. And then before and after school program is also an opportunity where a lot of those bubbles could be mixing. So that's why we're going to be utilizing the for preschool, would still have theirs in their classroom because they actually have their after time, before and after school time in their room. But we're looking at using the fellowship hall for kindergarten through 8th grade. So what you would have then is you still have students sitting with their classmates, not as close as this shows, but sitting with their classmates at these spots to kind of prevent a lot of that mixing of the bubbles that we're talking about here. When they go outside, obviously, then that transmission is much lower, and they can, be out a little more on the playground and playing football and stuff like that. But understanding that when we're in here, you have, a little bit more separation to keep those bubbles from mixing. And I mentioned that already, like some play would be taking place. And I think we need to understand that from a developmental standpoint of these children, that to completely limit that beyond to the point where they can develop would not be appropriate for them. So there will be some physical contact. I'm not going to say the game tag, but something like along those lines where there will be some physical contact, and we can't avoid that altogether with the development that students need to make in a social perspective. So those are kind of the big 3 areas. And now I'm going to talk a little bit more about, some things that might need to be a little more flexible. For example, this plan that we're working together with here might not work for everyone. And I think we're understanding of that there might be some students with underlying health conditions that parents are concerned about sending their children back in a situation like that until COVID is mostly gone. Students might have family members at home where they're afraid of the student getting the virus here and then taking it to their home and spreading it to their family member that might be at risk. Or even there might be some families here that feel that what we're doing is not quite strong enough to prevent the spread of COVID-19 as much as we could be doing, and they're just feeling uncomfortable sending their child to that environment. So if that's the case, then I think what we're going to need to do is try to take care of those families as best we can, but also understand that teachers are teaching an entire day in the classroom. So can we provide distance learning packets for those students? Probably not. But what something Rapid City is considering that actually seems pretty reasonable for us too would be to kind of offer that live stream option. And understand that this might not work very well for the youngest children unless they can have a parent support that's present. But for the older children especially, this could work pretty well, and it wouldn't be a lot more work for the teacher hardly at all. We could just get them their learning materials that are coming up for the week, They can tune in with a Zoom link with a good webcam and a good microphone on the teacher. And we could even hook up the computer to speakers so the child that's at home could even participate in discussions and things like that. So this seems to kind of be the path forward, especially if, let's say their child needs to be quarantined for a time if they were close to someone who was infected. We could provide that learning option for them still. Understanding, once again, with this chart here on the right, that the older your child is, the more effective this will be for them to learn at a distance, even live streaming like this. So when you have the preschool, kindergarten, first and second, the amount of learning that can take place in this format, not so much. When you have children in that age range too, more parent involvement is needed too. For that, you just got to be more involved in the learning process, just because that independence is just not there for your child. We wanted to go through a few different kind of the what if scenarios. I was very interested in this, and thankfully our South Dakota Department of Health has been working very hard on this, and this is kind of a little bit more out of our hands, I guess you could say. We're kind of like, when it comes to stuff like this, we'll kind of submit to our experts or submit to our state officials on this one. So let's say that an outbreak would happen in the school, or maybe a child would have COVID-19, or maybe their family member would have COVID-19 at our school. So let's say a student or staff member tests positive. What would happen in that situation? So the Department of Health would actually contact that person when they have tested positive, or their family, and then that person who tested positive would be asked to self-isolate, so they would not be coming to school in that situation. And then they must be symptom-free, and then kind of get the okay from the Department of Health to be able to return to school before they can come back. And then they would also work with the people that were in close contact in that case. So a close contact they identify as being within 6 feet for a period of 15 minutes. Just an idea, with a sustained time of being close, you're more likely to catch something. So basically they would work with the school officials to determine who would be a close contact, and the teachers and stuff like that, if we find out someone is infected. And then if anybody is identified as being close contact, someone sitting probably next to that person throughout the day, they would be asked to spend 14 days at home, and then just kind of be monitored, their symptoms monitored by the Department of Health, and get the A-OK to return eventually to school. So that's where that live streaming option could come in handy, or maybe some other alternative things we can do to take care of these students. And what this plan does for the Department of Health, it wouldn't necessarily require our school to shut down if a case would emerge in the school. If we're doing a good job, like they said, if we're doing a good job of keeping those bubbles from mixing, then we could probably handle this more on like a classroom by classroom basis, depending on kind of the age level appropriateness of the classroom, and then how comfortable parents are. Let's say you're a third grade family and there was a case in the classroom, your child wasn't a close contact, how would those families respond? So we're going to be kind of working with families in those situations if they come up. We pray they don't. If they come up, we would be working with those families to come up with some solutions for the short term until everyone's healthy and ready to return to the classroom. So this chart kind of is something they gave us too about how they would respond to this. So it's kind of a summary of what I just said, that they would work with the school to determine the close contact people, and then we'll notify also our families about, hey, there was a case in the third grade classroom. We keep the privacy of that student, whoever it was, but we would let families know when there would be a case involved, so that they could also make decisions for the best of their family too. So when it comes to let's say that there could be the situation changes locally and there's a big influx of cases locally, or let's say that we have maybe multiple cases in the school, even let's say a couple classrooms now have it. That's when maybe there could be some diversion of what we have planned here. But I think one thing I wanted to keep in mind here with that same chart I showed you earlier, which is a little bit more detailed now, that solutions might not always look the same for every classroom. That students that are in this age range, like preschool through second grade, their needs are best met when they're able to be at school. versus like 3rd through 8th grade, their needs can be met a little bit more at a distance than the younger kids. So it might not be always a uniform response. We might decide that it's best for preschool and 1st grade and kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade to be at school, as safely as we can, maybe extra safety measures incorporated. And we might say that 3rd through 8th grade, okay, we can have some distance learning take place. So we hope we never get to this point, obviously, but just to let you know that our response might not always be uniform across the entire school. We understand that the needs of our preschoolers and the needs of our 8th graders are very different. We're kind of a unique school in that way, where we have students from those age levels all the way across. So just keep that in mind, that I'm not going to say exactly what we would do, because every situation is going to warrant a different response. But just keep that in mind, that we are looking into that understanding that the needs of different children are different. So this is where I'll kind of wrap up and just understand that if you have any questions or feedback for this, you will have an opportunity to do that in either email me, or we will have a follow-up survey with some opportunities to share some thoughts too. And we pray that we can meet the needs of our families as much as we can. That's really our goal here. And our goal here is that we meet all those guiding principles we have, that our children stay safe and that they continue to grow. So thanks so much for listening. I know I always am a little more longer winded than I intend to be. So thanks for staying with me here, and God's blessings as we finish this summer. We look forward to seeing your children in the fall.